In a grand hall, shimmering with light and mysterious shadows, a young mother stands at the brink of despair, her heart weighed down by impossible choices no one should ever have to make. The innocent laughter of her son echoes in her mind, a haunting reminder of what she's fighting to protect. Then, the moment arrives. A spotlight, the auctioneer's call, and the piercing gaze of a mysterious billionaire. But this isn't just a business deal. As she steps into his world, her struggle to survive becomes an unsettling journey of discovery. What does he truly want? And what is she willing to risk to secure her son's future? The answers lie in a gripping tale filled with twists, each moment pulling you deeper. You won't want to stop until the final, shocking conclusion. The story begins.
Sophia, a young woman struggling with life's relentless challenges, lives with her son, Ethan. With no other options left, she attends a peculiar auction where women are bid on as if they were commodities, purchased by wealthy magnates to act as companions. For Sophia, this isn't a decision, but a desperate escape route. Sitting nervously in a corner of the extravagant hall, she feels the crushing weight of her decisions. Her heart races, each beat amplifying her fear and insecurity about what lies ahead. Images of Ethan, cared for by their elderly neighbor, flicker through her mind. Overdue bills, the looming threat of eviction, and nights where Ethan went to bed hungry, all of it pushed her to this unimaginable choice. The event host, a man in an impeccably tailored suit with a smile as fake as his sincerity, approaches her with a final reminder. Stay calm, Sophia. Smile and don't look directly at the guests. With that, he departs, leaving her alone in a room filled with elegantly dressed men, their scrutinizing gazes dissecting every woman like priceless artifacts. Swallowing hard, she braces herself as her name is called. Lot number 19. The auctioneer's voice echoes with authority and calculation. Trembling, she steps into the spotlight. The intense glare blinds her momentarily, and the stage lights scorch her skin as beads of sweat form on her brow. She struggles to hold her head high, but feels the searing intensity of their invasive stares. A stunning beauty, the auctioneer announced, his words dripping with superficial charm. The room hummed with murmurs of approval, a cacophony of dehumanizing admiration. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice resonated across the hall. $2 million. The room fell into complete silence. All eyes turned toward a man seated at the far end, his sun-kissed skin and piercing gaze radiating an air of authority.
Alexander Hayes, a billionaire known for his immense wealth and enigmatic demeanor. The auctioneer, momentarily stunned by the unprecedented opening bid, repeated the figure to confirm. No one dared to counter it. "Sold!" he finally declared, his voice triumphant, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. Sophia felt her knees buckle beneath her, but she willed herself to remain composed as she descended from the stage. In that instant, her life had changed forever. Alexander approached her with an unreadable expression, his voice calm and firm. "We need to discuss the terms." He extended his hand, gesturing for her to follow him into a private room. Sophia hesitated, but eventually complied. The room was spacious and elegantly furnished. Alexander motioned for her to sit as he retrieved an envelope from a nearby table. "This is the contract," he said, handing it to her. "Read it carefully." Sophia's trembling hands grasped the document. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rapid pounding of her heart. As she scanned the terms, her breath quickened. "You want me to bear a child and leave it with you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander folded his arms, his expression unyielding. "I need an heir. After the child is born, you'll leave. The contract is explicit." Sophia shot to her feet, a surge of anger and fear surging through her. "I can't do this. I won't abandon my own child." Alexander's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained measured. "You knew what you were agreeing to when you entered the auction. Regret has no place here." "This is inhumane!" she cried, clutching the contract tightly. "You think you can buy people and discard the mother like she doesn't matter?" Alexander stepped closer, his gaze as cold and cutting as steel. "I paid $2 million for you, Sophia. This is not a game. You have no choice." Sophia's heart raced as the reality of her predicament sank in. She was trapped.
Alexander placed a pen on the table in front of her. "Sign it. Once the child is born, you'll receive the money and the freedom to move on with your life." Sophia stared at the contract, her hands trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. Images of Ethan, her young son, filled her mind. Her sacrifice was meant to ensure his future. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. "This isn't right," she murmured as she sank into the chair. Alexander leaned in, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "Right or wrong doesn't matter here. What matters is that you honor the agreement." With her heart sinking, Sophia picked up the pen and signed her name, her signature sealing a fate she could not escape. Alexander took the document, his voice crisp. "Good. Tomorrow morning we'll conduct the necessary tests. After that, you'll be taken to my estate. Rest now." Without another word, he left the room, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts and regrets. As her eyes fell on her signature, it felt as though she had signed away her very soul. The next morning, a sleek limousine awaited her outside her modest apartment. The farewell with Ethan was brief, but heartrending. She told him she would be away for work for a few months, promising to call whenever she could. Ethan, smiling innocently, waved goodbye, unaware of the heavy burden his mother carried. The drive to Alexander's estate was silent. Sophia gazed out the window, watching the barren desert give way to opulent modern structures. When they arrived, the grandeur of the mansion left her speechless. Towering iron gates opened to reveal meticulously manicured gardens and a palatial residence straight out of a fairy tale. Alexander stood at the entrance, his face as unreadable as ever. He guided her inside, his tone clipped as he provided a brief tour and outlined the house rules. "Your privacy will be respected, but I expect you to fulfill your part of the agreement without question," Alexander stated, his tone firm and devoid of emotion. With that, he left her in the care of Margaret, a kind-hearted middle-aged woman. Margaret guided Sophia to her room, which was elegantly decorated in soft, calming tones, a stark contrast to the modest simplicity of her previous life. On the bed were neatly arranged clothes and accessories selected for her. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me," Margaret said with a warm smile.
Sophia thanked her, though an unshakable feeling of being out of place lingered. That night, standing on her balcony, she gazed at the horizon, her heart heavy with longing for Ethan. The pain of separation constricted her chest, but she reminded herself that this was for his future, a sacrifice to ensure his well-being. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Alexander. "Tomorrow, we'll see my doctor," he informed her curtly before leaving. Sophia merely nodded, her silence speaking volumes. The weight of her decision pressed down on her more heavily with each passing moment, but there was no turning back now. The next morning, Sophia rose early. The silence of the mansion felt more unsettling than comforting. Her first night there had been sleepless. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future. The bed was plush with silk sheets, but the oppressive reality left her unable to find peace. Soon, Margaret knocked and escorted her to meet Alexander's doctor. As they walked through the mansion, Sophia couldn't help but marvel at its grandeur. Persian carpets lined the halls, walls adorned with masterpieces by renowned painters, and large windows offered views of immaculately maintained gardens. However, there was little time to absorb the opulence before they stepped into a waiting limousine. The clinic, located in a sleek, modern building in downtown California, was as pristine as it was intimidating. Dr. Jonathan, a calm and reassuring man, greeted Sophia with professionalism. After thorough examinations, he confirmed everything was in place to begin the process of fertilization. Sophia nodded quietly, masking her unease. Alexander remained distant throughout the visit, observing with his usual stoic demeanor. To him, this was merely another step in a meticulously crafted plan. To Sophia, it was a painful reminder that in 9 months, she would have to part with a piece of herself. Back at the mansion, Sophia kept herself occupied by exploring her surroundings. Each room seemed grander than the last. The library was lined with towering bookshelves. The indoor pool, surrounded by marble columns, gleamed under soft lighting, and the music room housed rare, exquisite instruments. Yet, despite its splendor, the mansion felt hollow, devoid of warmth or soul. Sophia noticed that Alexander, despite his immense wealth, seemed shrouded in loneliness. He rarely smiled, and even his polite gestures carried a calculated air.
In the first few days, their interactions were strictly businesslike. Alexander ensured that everything adhered to the contract, never venturing into personal territory. Sophia, on the other hand, struggled to reconcile her presence there, feeling increasingly out of place. Nights were the hardest, spent staring at the ceiling, her thoughts consumed by Ethan, and the reality that she was about to carry a child she couldn't claim as her own. By the second week, Alexander hosted a lavish dinner party at the mansion for his business associates. As part of the agreement, Sophia was required to dress formally and accompany him. The gown chosen for her was stunning, but her steps faltered as she descended the grand staircase. In the main hall, the guests regarded her with curiosity. Some greeted her with polite smiles, while others exchanged glances that made her feel exposed. Alexander stayed by her side throughout the evening, introducing her as "my special guest." When they found a quieter corner, he asked in a rare moment of apparent concern, "Are you all right?" "I'm trying to adjust," Sophia admitted honestly. He nodded, but offered no further words. For him, events like this were a matter of routine, a necessary obligation. For Sophia, it was her first encounter with a world she couldn't fully comprehend. After the party, Sophia returned to her room, exhausted. Before bed, she called her neighbor to check on Ethan. Hearing his cheerful voice brought her a fleeting sense of comfort, but it also unleashed a flood of tears. Her longing for her son was overwhelming, but she knew she couldn't afford to falter now. Turning back was not an option. As the days passed, Sophia began noticing small details about Alexander, subtle contradictions to his otherwise unyielding demeanor. He was meticulous and demanding, Yet there were fleeting moments when his humanity shone through. One afternoon, she spotted him in the garden, carefully watering a rare plant that seemed particularly significant to him. "This plant belonged to my mother," he explained, noticing her curious gaze. "She used to say that tending to it brought her peace." For the first time, Sophia felt a profound sense of empathy. In that moment, Alexander wasn't the commanding figure she had feared, but a man quietly grappling with his own pain.
Gradually, Sophia began to see that while their motivations differed, they both carried burdens that weighed heavily on their hearts. Margaret, the housekeeper, also started to open up during the long afternoons at the mansion. She shared stories about Alexander's life, revealing that he had taken on immense responsibilities at a young age after the untimely death of his parents. These conversations gave Sophia a deeper understanding of the man she had thought to be unreachable. Yet, the loneliness within her remained. Sophia made a conscious effort not to grow attached to the mansion or Alexander, reminding herself that her time there was temporary. However, in her isolation, she found solace in quiet walks through the garden or stargazing from her balcony at night. One evening, there was a soft knock at her door. To her surprise, it was Alexander. He looked less rigid than usual, his expression almost gentle. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside. Sophia sat down, bracing herself for more instructions or demands. But instead, Alexander seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, as though searching for the right words. "I know this arrangement has been difficult for you. I don't want to make it harder. I just wanted to say, I admire your courage." Sophia blinked, startled. His tone was unexpectedly tender, and for the first time, she glimpsed something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before: vulnerability. The moment was brief but powerful, planting a seed of doubt in her mind. Perhaps Alexander wasn't as cold and unfeeling as he appeared. Perhaps, beneath his stoic exterior, he was as fractured as she was. After he left, Sophia sat in quiet reflection. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt a faint glimmer of something unfamiliar, a possibility, however distant, of uncovering something deeper between them. Life at the mansion settled into a slow rhythm, yet each moment seemed to add a new layer to the intricate relationship between Sophia and Alexander. They were like mismatched puzzle pieces, trying to find a way to fit together despite the circumstances that had bound them. Sophia knew time was slipping away, and that soon she would be carrying Alexander's child. The reality terrified her, yet it also awakened a quiet curiosity. Who was this man who had demanded such an immense sacrifice from her?
As she adjusted to life at the mansion, Sophia began to notice the small details in her surroundings and her growing routines. The garden became her sanctuary, a place where she could bask in the warmth of the sun and listen to the soothing murmur of fountains. She also observed that Alexander spent significant time in the garden. He rarely initiated conversation, but she felt his watchful eyes on her every move. There was a subtle tension between them, one they both seemed to acknowledge but chose not to address. One afternoon, as Sophia strolled through the garden, she saw Alexander meticulously pruning a plant. When he sensed her presence, he cast a quick glance her way before returning to his task, clearly not expecting a conversation. "Do you enjoy gardening?" Sophia asked, hesitantly, breaking the silence. "It helps me organize my thoughts," Alexander replied, without looking up. Sophia detected a slight vulnerability in his response. Though reserved, he wasn't entirely inaccessible. She chose to respect his space, but couldn't suppress her growing curiosity about the enigmatic man behind the stern facade. That evening, Alexander surprised Sophia by joining her for dinner. Until then, she had always eaten alone, meals delivered to her room or a quiet corner of the mansion by Margaret. Alexander appeared calm, but his presence carried an undeniable weight. "Have you adjusted?" he asked, breaking the silence as he poured wine into his glass. "I think so, as much as I can," Sophia replied, carefully maintaining a composed tone. Alexander studied her for a moment, as though attempting to read her thoughts. "I know this isn't easy, but I hope you understand, it's necessary." Sophia wanted to ask, necessary for whom, but swallowed her question. Instead, she nodded and resumed eating in silence. There was something in his tone that hinted at an emotional burden he worked hard to conceal. As the weeks passed, Sophia began noticing subtle but meaningful gestures from Alexander. He was discreet, but unexpectedly considerate. One day, after she offhandedly mentioned missing dishes from her hometown, Margaret brought her a tray filled with special preparations.
"Mr. Alexander requested these for you," Margaret said with a smile. Sophia was taken aback, but chose not to comment. It was hard to decipher Alexander's intentions. On one hand, he remained aloof and distant. On the other, he seemed to care for her in quiet, unspoken ways. One morning, Sophia discovered a stack of books neatly arranged on the table beside her bed. They were novels and short stories she had casually mentioned in a passing conversation. The thoughtfulness behind the gesture stirred an unexpected warmth within her. One memorable moment occurred when Sophia wandered into the mansion's music room. The door was ajar and soft piano melodies echoed through the hall. Intrigued, she stepped inside and saw Alexander at the piano, his hands moving deftly across the keys with surprising elegance. "You play the piano?" she asked, her surprise evident. Alexander looked up, clearly uncomfortable at being caught in such an intimate moment. "My mother taught me when I was young," he replied, withdrawing his hands from the keys. "It's beautiful," Sophia remarked, stepping closer. Alexander avoided her gaze, seemingly unsure how to respond to her praise. In that fleeting moment, Sophia glimpsed a man deeply connected to his past, far removed from the rigid persona he projected. Another time, as Sophia wandered through the garden, she spotted a small bird fallen from a tree, its fragile body injured. Without hesitation, she knelt and gently lifted the delicate creature into her hands. Alexander appeared moments later, his expression curious as he observed her. "What will you do with it?" he asked. "I'll care for it until it's strong enough to fly again," she said firmly. Alexander said nothing, but something in his gaze hinted at admiration. The simplicity of her action seemed to resonate with him in a way even he hadn't anticipated. The nights in the mansion remained lonely, but Sophia began finding solace in the small routines she created for herself. She enjoyed quiet walks along the serene hallways, marveling at the architectural splendor that surrounded her. One evening, as she strolled through the halls, she unexpectedly encountered Alexander. He looked tired, the sharp lines of his face softened by exhaustion. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Sophia hesitated before answering. "It's hard sometimes, too many thoughts." Alexander nodded, as though he understood that all too well. To her surprise, he invited her to join him for tea in the library. Surrounded by towering bookshelves, they spoke for longer than they ever had before. For the first time, Sophia felt as though she was beginning to see beyond his carefully constructed facade. The change did not go unnoticed by others in the mansion. Margaret, who had always been kind, now treated Sophia with the warmth of a close friend. Even Alexander seemed more at ease around her, though he maintained his serious demeanor. Yet the way he looked at her had shifted, as though he saw her in a new light. For her part, Sophia began to feel less isolated.
While the nature of their arrangement remained an undeniable barrier, she found herself discovering small moments of connection and meaning amidst the mansion's emptiness. Despite the fragile peace that had settled over the mansion, the reality of Sophia's situation loomed like a shadow. Every day, she reminded herself that all of this was temporary. One evening, as she gazed at the stars from her balcony, Alexander joined her. They sat in silence for a while, their attention fixed on the night sky. "You think a lot about the future, don't you?" he broke the silence. "I can't help it," Sophia admitted. "All of this feels so temporary." Alexander turned to her, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "The future can be built, Sophia. It depends on how we choose to handle the present." His words brought her an inexplicable warmth. Though he didn't say it outright, there was a quiet promise in his voice, a suggestion that perhaps their fates weren't entirely set in stone.
The staff at the mansion began noticing the shift in the air. The cold detachment that had once defined the place was gradually replaced by a subtle warmth. Margaret, in particular, seemed pleased to see Alexander less isolated and more open. Sophia, too, felt a change within herself. For the first time in months, she felt a connection to the part of her she thought she had lost. Yet she couldn't ignore the crossroads ahead. The emotions developing between her and Alexander could complicate everything, but she chose to embrace the present, even as the future remained uncertain. The morning light bathed the mansion in soft hues, but Sophia couldn't shake her unease. The growing bond between her and Alexander was something she hadn't anticipated, and the secret of Ethan weighed heavily on her. The thought of Alexander discovering the truth terrified her, yet the burden of keeping it hidden was becoming unbearable. After breakfast, Sophia decided to clear her mind with a walk in the garden. She tried to lose herself in the beauty of the flowers and trees, but the tranquility was shattered by Margaret's urgent voice calling her name. Sophia hurried back to the mansion and found Alexander standing in the living room holding a photograph. His expression was unreadable, but tension radiated from him. "Who is this boy?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with undeniable pressure. Sophia froze. The photograph in his hand was of Ethan, one of the few she had brought with her, carefully hidden away. Somehow, Alexander had found it. "He's my son," she admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alexander walked toward her slowly, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "You lied to me," he said, his tone low but as sharp as a blade. "Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I was afraid it would complicate everything, that you'd think I wasn't fit for this arrangement." Alexander crossed his arms, his gaze cold and unwavering. "Then why agree to this, knowing you'd have to leave another child behind?" The question struck her like a blow. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself before responding. "I did it for my son. For the unpaid bills, the overdue rent, the nights he went to bed hungry. I had no other choice." Her words were raw with emotion, and Alexander remained silent for a long time, as if trying to process everything he had just heard. Finally, he turned away, moving to stand by the window. "You should have trusted me," he said, his voice distant. Sophia could hear the disappointment in his tone, and tears she could no longer hold back began to fall. She knew this moment could destroy the fragile connection they had been building, but she also understood she couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. That evening, Alexander invited Sophia to the library. The room was dimly lit, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and charged with tension. Alexander sat in his usual chair, a stack of documents laid out before him.
"I've reviewed the terms of the contract," he began, his tone direct. "Nowhere does it allow for a secret like this. However, it also doesn't specify how such a situation should be handled." Sophia felt a wave of panic rising within her. "Please don't send me away. I'll honor the agreement, I promise." Alexander raised a hand, silencing her. "I'm not suggesting that, but trust is essential, Sophia, and now we need to rebuild it." He opened the folder in front of him, pulled out a sheet of paper, and slid it toward her. "I want you to see Ethan again. You'll be allowed to visit him, but there's one condition. He cannot know the truth about our arrangement. Not yet." Sophia blinked, stunned. Alexander's unexpected generosity left her both grateful and burdened with guilt. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Alexander sighed, clasping his hands on the table. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without a mother. I want your son to have at least part of your presence, even if it's temporary." His words carried a pain that Sophia hadn't anticipated. For the first time, she began to understand the man behind the hardened exterior. Alexander wasn't just a man seeking an heir. He was someone quietly bearing his own deep scars.
The next day, Sophia was driven to see Ethan. The journey was long, each mile drawing her closer to her son. When they arrived, emotions overwhelmed her. Ethan ran into her arms as soon as he saw her, and she held him tightly, unwilling to let go. "You're back!" he exclaimed, his voice brimming with joy. Sophia smiled, though her heart felt heavy. She knew this reunion was fleeting, and that she would soon have to leave him again. They spent the day together, playing and laughing as they once had. But as evening fell, the weight of their impending separation pressed down on her. When it was time to leave, Ethan clung to her. "When will you come back?" he asked. "Soon, my love," she promised, though uncertainty clouded her words. Returning to the mansion, Sophia felt physically and emotionally drained. Yet a small part of her was grateful for the brief but precious moments she'd had with her son. Alexander was waiting for her in the living room, his expression composed. "How was he?" he asked, his tone carrying genuine concern. Sophia sank into a chair opposite him, feeling utterly vulnerable. "He's happy, so full of joy, but leaving him again, it's unbearable." Alexander nodded, as if he understood entirely. He said nothing more, but his gaze conveyed what words could not. In the days that followed, their relationship shifted. A quiet understanding and mutual respect replaced the tension that once defined their interactions. Alexander became more thoughtful, and Sophia found herself trusting him more. Small gestures, like sharing meals or conversing during garden walks, became meaningful moments. One evening in the library, Alexander shared something unexpected. "My mother died when I was young," he began, his voice low. "My father was distant, always consumed with work. I grew up carrying responsibilities I didn't fully understand." Sophia watched him, realizing he was revealing something deeply personal. "That must have been incredibly difficult," she said softly. "It was," he admitted. "But I think it shaped who I am today. Still, I can't shake the feeling that something has always been missing." Sophia wanted to comfort him, but she knew Alexander still held onto his barriers. Yet his moment of vulnerability brought them closer together. As months passed, their relationship continued to evolve. What had begun as a cold agreement was now marked by mutual admiration and respect. Sophia no longer saw Alexander solely as a powerful man, but as someone capable of profound empathy. In turn, Alexander recognized in Sophia a resilience and compassion he hadn't expected. Even so, both knew that time was moving forward,
and that the uncertain future loomed ever closer. In the days following Sophia's visit with Ethan, a strange calm settled over the mansion. The tension that had once been palpable was now replaced by a quiet acceptance. However, the shadow of their agreement lingered, an unshakable reminder of the complexities binding them. Sophia found solace in small routines: morning walks in the garden, afternoons spent reading in the library, and quiet nights stargazing from the balcony. Yet, the thought of her son, Ethan, never left her, and his laughter echoed in her mind like a bittersweet melody. One morning, as she sipped her coffee, she was surprised to see Alexander appear. He seemed more relaxed than usual, his expression almost approachable. "I want you to come with me today," he said, breaking the quiet atmosphere. She raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across her face. "Where to?" she asked. "I have a meeting at one of my family's properties. It's a quiet place, and I think you'll like it." She hesitated briefly, but eventually nodded. Any chance to leave the mansion was something she welcomed. The drive passed in comfortable silence. Alexander drove with steady ease, while Sophia watched the scenery change as they left the bustling city behind. After nearly an hour, they arrived at a secluded location surrounded by rolling sand dunes. It was tranquil, with a small house built in a classic American style. "This used to be my mother's retreat," Alexander explained as they stepped out of the car. "She came here whenever she needed peace."
Sophia followed him into the house, taking in its simplicity and charm. Unlike the mansion, the space felt intimate and inviting. The walls were adorned with woven rugs and antique lanterns, and the air carried a faint scent of herbs. Alexander led her to a terrace overlooking the desert. The silence was absolute, broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind. Sophia sank into one of the wooden chairs, feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Alexander admitted as he sat beside her. "It's beautiful," Sophia said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Alexander was quiet for a long time before asking, "Do you miss home?" Sophia sighed. Her thoughts drifted to the life she had left behind. "I miss what it represented, a simple place, filled with memories." Alexander nodded, his understanding evident in his expression. The moment brought an odd sense of comfort, an unspoken connection between them. After that visit, their relationship began to feel more natural. Alexander started involving Sophia in different aspects of his life, from meetings with staff at the mansion to decisions about daily operations. For Sophia, it was an opportunity to see beyond his stoic facade and better understand the man behind the cold exterior. One evening during dinner, Alexander surprised her by broaching an unexpected topic. "I've been thinking about renovating the mansion," he said casually, "making it feel more like a home." Sophia raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Do you have any ideas?" she asked. "I want to create a space where a family can feel at ease," he replied, his gaze briefly averting hers. Sophia's heart tightened. It was the first time Alexander hinted at a future that extended beyond their agreement. Yet she knew there was much to confront before such a vision could become reality. One afternoon, as Sophia strolled through the garden, she saw Margaret carrying a tray of tea and cookies. The housekeeper looked unusually radiant, prompting Sophia to comment. "You look happy today. Is something going on?"
Margaret smiled, her eyes twinkling. "It's just lovely to see how things are changing around here. The mansion has never felt so full of life." Sophia felt her cheeks flush, but said nothing. She knew Margaret was alluding to the evolving relationship between her and Alexander. Though uncertain about the future, Sophia couldn't deny that something was indeed growing between them. As the days passed, Sophia began noticing changes in Alexander as well. He spent more time with her, showing a newfound openness and approachability. Conversations that had once been brief and formal now stretched into hours, with both sharing more about their lives. One evening, during one such conversation, Alexander revealed something that deeply moved Sophia. "I never knew how to cope with losing my mother," he admitted. His voice weighted with emotion. "She was the cornerstone of our family. When she was gone, it felt like everything fell apart." Sophia felt a wave of empathy wash over her. She understood the pain of losing someone important, though their experiences were different. That shared understanding forged a deeper bond between them. Despite their growing closeness, the contract remained a barrier. Many nights, Sophia lay awake, torn between her burgeoning emotions and the responsibilities she bore. One evening, Alexander knocked on her door, his expression unusually unsettled. "I know there are limits between us," he began, sitting in the chair opposite her bed. "But I want you to know I'm trying to understand what all of this really means." Sophia's heart raced. There was something in his words that hinted at a significant shift. "So am I," she replied honestly. Alexander nodded, seemingly relieved by her response. Though uncertainty lingered, both appeared ready to face whatever lay ahead, together. The staff at the mansion began noticing the effects of these changes. Margaret, ever observant, remarked that Alexander seemed lighter, more human. Even the other workers commented on how Sophia's presence had transformed the previously cold and distant atmosphere into something warmer.
For her part, Sophia began to see the mansion as more than just a temporary shelter. It wasn't yet home, but it felt like a place where something meaningful was taking shape, though she still couldn't define what that might be. Each night, as she stared at the stars, Sophia felt herself nearing a turning point. The bond between her and Alexander was something she hadn't anticipated, yet it now felt inevitable. Both were changing, and the journey they had embarked on together was beginning to take on a life of its own. One morning, as Alexander sat reviewing documents in his office, Sophia entered with a tray of coffee. He looked up, surprised, but said nothing as she set it down on the desk. "I thought you might need a break," she said, trying to keep her tone casual. Alexander studied her for a moment before replying, "Thank you. It's been hard to focus lately." Sophia hesitated, then sat in the chair across from him. "Is work giving you trouble?" He shook his head. "No, it's just, there's too much on my mind." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Both seemed to be weighing unspoken thoughts. Finally, Sophia broke the quiet. "Do you feel like you've made the right decisions?" Alexander's expression softened as he looked at her. "I'm not sure. Life has taught me to be pragmatic, but sometimes I wonder if being too rigid has kept me from what truly matters." Sophia heard the vulnerability in his voice. For the first time, he seemed to acknowledge that more was at stake than family obligations or professional responsibilities. In the days that followed, their routines began to shift. Alexander started inviting Sophia to join him in meetings and social events. He appeared genuinely interested in introducing her to his world, and Sophia gained a clearer understanding of the pressures and responsibilities he carried. At a charity gala, Alexander introduced Sophia as his companion. Curious glances from the guests quickly turned toward them, but Alexander appeared unbothered. For him, the opinions of others held no weight.
Sophia, however, felt uncomfortable under the weight of their scrutiny.
"Are you all right?" Alexander asked, guiding her to a quieter corner. "I'm trying to get used to it," Sophia admitted, forcing a small smile. Alexander gently took her hand, a gesture that startled her but brought an unexpected comfort. "Don't worry, I'm always here with you." His simple yet meaningful words filled Sophia with a warmth she couldn't quite explain. Moments of closeness between them became more frequent. Sophia noticed that Alexander had begun opening up more, sharing aspects of his life he had previously kept hidden. He spoke of his childhood, the expectations placed upon him by his family, and the immense pressure to uphold the Hayes' family. In turn, Sophia shared her own stories, the challenges of raising Ethan, the sacrifices she had made, and the small joys that had kept her going. Alexander listened intently, revealing a side of himself that was surprisingly human and approachable. One night, as they strolled through the garden under the soft glow of the moon, Alexander suddenly stopped. "Sophia," he began, his voice unusually tender, "I want you to know that despite everything, you've shown me things I never thought I'd see." Sophia turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Like what?" "That life isn't just about obligations and contracts. Sometimes we have to make room for something new." Sophia's heart raced. She knew she was beginning to fall in love with Alexander, but the contract between them remained an undeniable barrier. The staff at the mansion began noticing the subtle shifts in their relationship. Margaret, ever perceptive, treated Sophia with increasing warmth, as though she were a permanent part of the household. Other employees exchanged knowing smiles whenever they saw Alexander and Sophia together. Despite the growing closeness, Sophia couldn't ignore the weight of reality. Each passing day brought them closer to the contract's end, and the fear of losing everything, especially her connection with Alexander, gnawed at her constantly. One afternoon, while reading in the library, Sophia noticed Alexander entering, his expression serious.
"We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Sophia set her book aside, sensing the tension in the air. "What is it?" Alexander sat in the chair across from her, his hands clasped together on the table. "We need to discuss the future. I know what the contract says about what happens after the baby is born, but things have changed." Sophia held her breath. She had known this moment would come, but had never felt ready for it. "What do you mean by that?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to explore other options," Alexander said decisively. "I don't want you to leave." Her heart pounded. What he was proposing was everything she had silently hoped for, but her fear of raising her expectations held her back. "What does that mean?" she finally asked. "It means we need to find a way to do this together." His words echoed in Sophia's mind. She knew the situation was far from simple, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. In the days that followed, Sophia and Alexander began speaking more openly about their fears and expectations. Both acknowledged that they were grappling with emotions far beyond what the contract had intended. Sophia started imagining a future that included Alexander and her son, Ethan, while Alexander began to see the possibility of building a real family. However, challenges still loomed. Alexander's deep-seated sense of duty to his family's expectations, and Sophia's acceptance that her life could never return to what it once was. One quiet evening, as they sat on the terrace, gazing at the stars, Alexander turned to Sophia and said something she would never forget. "I didn't know what love was until you came into my life." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. She knew that despite the difficulties,
Something extraordinary had blossomed between them. As the soft glow of sunset filled the mansion, Sophia sat in the music room, one of her newfound sanctuaries. Her fingers gently glided over the piano keys, creating a melancholic tune. Alexander entered silently, the sound of her playing drawing him in.
"Did you teach yourself to play?" he asked, his voice breaking the quiet. Sophia looked up, momentarily startled but offering a faint smile. "My mother taught me when I was little. It was how we connected, even during hard times." Alexander nodded, stepping closer. He sat beside her on the piano bench, his eyes fixed on her hands as they moved gracefully over the keys. "You have a gift," he said softly. Sophia felt the unspoken tension between them, but didn't respond. After a pause, Alexander continued, his tone reflective. "Sophia, I've thought a lot about everything we've shared, about what brought us to this point." She stopped playing and turned to face him. The seriousness in his expression told her he was about to say something important. "And what have you concluded?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Alexander drew a deep breath before answering. "I can't ignore the feelings that have developed between us, but I also know that my past and the expectations of my family remain obstacles." Sophia felt a blend of hope and unease. Alexander rarely spoke of his internal struggles, and hearing him admit this was a clear sign he was ready to confront his own pain. That evening, Alexander invited her for a walk in the garden. The gentle breeze and rustling leaves created a serene atmosphere, but the weight of the impending conversation lingered in the air. "My father was a very strict man," Alexander began, walking beside her. "He believed the honor of the family was paramount. I grew up with the pressure of meeting his expectations, and it shaped how I saw the world." Sophia listened attentively, sensing the pain behind his words. "And that's why you feel the need for an heir?" Sophia asked gently. Alexander stopped, turning to face her. "In part, yes, but also because, deep down, I've always been afraid of being alone." Sophia's chest tightened. She understood the battle with loneliness, but hearing it from Alexander revealed a depth to him she hadn't fully appreciated. The next day, Alexander invited Sophia to accompany him to the desert. They left early in the morning, and soon the golden dunes stretched before them like an endless ocean. Reaching a secluded oasis, Alexander explained its significance to him. It was a place he often visited when he needed clarity. "This place reminds me that even in the middle of the desert, life persists," he said, as they walked along the edge of the crystal-clear water. Sophia felt deeply connected to the moment, sensing it marked a turning point in their journey together. They sat under the shade of a palm tree, and Alexander began to speak again. "I've spent so much of my life trapped by the past and the expectations of others. I've never allowed myself to explore what I truly want." Sophia looked at him, the sincerity in his voice unmistakable. "So, what do you want now?" she asked, her heart pounding. Alexander turned to her, his eyes bright under the sun. "I want to live differently. I want to build something real, unbound by contracts or obligations." Tears pricked Sophia's eyes, but she held them back. His words were everything she had hoped to hear, even as the lingering fears between them remained. Returning to the mansion, the air between them felt lighter, but they both knew there were unresolved issues. Sophia spent long nights reflecting on her choices and the impact they would have on her son, Ethan. She understood that moving forward would require her to confront her own pain and let go of her fears. One night,
As she gazed at the starry sky from the balcony, Alexander approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her and stood beside her in silence for a few moments. "You know, Sophia," he began, his voice low and introspective, "I never thought I'd meet someone who would make me question everything I once believed." She turned to look at him. The weight of his words sank in. "You've shown me that life can be more, that there's room for things beyond duty and expectations."
Sophia smiled softly, her eyes filled with emotion. "And you've shown me that strength can be found in the midst of pain. Without you, I wouldn't have come this far." In the days that followed, Alexander began taking concrete steps to redefine their relationship. He reviewed the terms of their contract. Although the clauses regarding the future of the child remained unchanged, he made it clear that he wanted to find a fair solution for both of them. Sophia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She knew many challenges still lay ahead, but she also sensed they were finally moving in the right direction. The staff at the mansion noticed the undeniable transformation. Alexander's usual cold demeanor gave way to a warmer presence, while Sophia carried herself with newfound confidence. One afternoon, Margaret, ever perceptive, remarked to Sophia, "I've always known Mr. Alexander had a good heart. He just needed someone to help him find it again." Sophia smiled, her heart full of gratitude for everything that had transpired, yet she knew the future remained uncertain. She and Alexander would have to confront their fears and work together to build something lasting. For the first time, however, she felt hope, a chance for love to overcome the challenges ahead. As the sun set once more over the mansion, Sophia and Alexander sat together on the terrace, watching the horizon. Both were acutely aware of the difficult road ahead, but were equally determined to face it side by side. The tension that once cloaked the mansion had dissipated, replaced by a gentler, more welcoming air. Still, the weight of the future lingered over them. One morning, Alexander called Sophia into his office. The room, often imposing, felt unusually warm that day. He gestured for her to sit, and Sophia approached with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. "I've been thinking a lot about our agreement and everything that has happened since you came here," he began, his tone calm yet tinged with emotion. Sophia kept her gaze steady, waiting. "When we signed this contract, my sole objective was to ensure an heir for the family. But everything has changed," Alexander continued, his hands clasped tightly on the desk. "I can't ignore the feelings that have developed between us."
Sophia's heart raced. This was what she had longed to hear, but fear of what might come next gripped her. "And what does that mean?" she asked softly. "It means I want to find a way to make this work for both of us. I want you to stay, not because of the contract, but because we choose to be together." His words were a beacon of hope, but Sophia knew things weren't so simple. There were still layers of complexity to their situation, and she needed to be sure they were both ready to face the consequences. That afternoon, as she strolled through the garden, Sophia reflected on Alexander's words. Her feelings for him had grown undeniably strong, but the harsh realities remained. Her son, Ethan, was in another city, and the contract stipulated she would leave after the baby was born. Near the central fountain, she found Margaret tending to the plants and decided to open up. "Margaret, do you think I can trust Alexander?" she asked hesitantly. "Mr. Alexander is a man of his word. He doesn't make promises lightly, and when he does, he intends to keep them. But he's also human, Sophia, and like you, he's trying to find balance between what he feels and what he believes he must do." Sophia stood quietly, absorbing Margaret's words. They brought her a measure of comfort, even though she still felt conflicted.
The next day, Alexander invited Sophia to visit an orphanage he had been supporting for years. It was a gesture he had made before, but this time it held new significance. When they arrived, the children greeted them with laughter and hugs. Sophia felt a wave of warmth watching Alexander interact with them. His usual stern demeanor softened, replaced by a genuine kindness and care. "You really care about these kids," Sophia said as they stood watching the children play. "They remind me that life is about more than responsibilities and work. There's beauty in simplicity," Alexander replied, his gaze intense as it met hers. His words resonated deeply with Sophia. For the first time, she felt Alexander was truly ready to change, to relinquish some of the control he had always held so tightly in exchange for something more genuine.
Returning to the mansion, Alexander made a pivotal decision to amend their contract. He summoned his legal team and adjusted several terms, ensuring Sophia would have greater freedom and the right to stay connected with Ethan after the baby was born. When he presented the revised contract to Sophia, she couldn't hide her emotion. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her hands trembling as she held the document. Alexander's voice was steady but earnest. "Because you deserve better than the terms we started with, and because I want you to know that this is no longer just about duty from me." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. For so long she had lived under the weight of the agreement, believing it was the only thing tying her to Alexander. Now she realized that their connection had grown into something far more profound. In the days that followed, the connection between Alexander and Sophia deepened. What once were formal conversations became effortless exchanges. They shared stories, dreams, and fears, creating a solid foundation for whatever awaited them. One evening, as they sat on the terrace, Alexander shared an idea he had been considering for some time. "Sophia, I want to meet Ethan." His suggestion took Sophia by surprise. She sat silent for a few moments, trying to process his words. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice laced with hesitation. "I'm sure. He's a part of you, and I want to know everything about your life." Sophia's heart warmed at Alexander's willingness to include Ethan in their lives. It was a clear sign of his commitment to building something truly lasting. The journey to meet Ethan was a mix of nervous anticipation and quiet excitement. Though Alexander appeared calm, Sophia could sense his underlying nerves. When they arrived, Ethan ran straight into Sophia's arms, holding her tightly. "Mommy!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with pure joy. Alexander stood back, observing with a faint smile. When Sophia introduced Ethan to him, the boy looked up at Alexander with wide, curious eyes. "Are you my mom's friend?" he asked, innocently. Alexander knelt to meet Ethan's gaze and replied, "Yes, and I hope we can be friends too." Ethan grinned, and Sophia felt an overwhelming wave of relief and happiness. The interaction between them was natural, as though Ethan instinctively understood that Alexander was someone safe. Returning to the mansion, Sophia felt for the first time that they were truly creating a solid foundation. Her relationship with Alexander was no longer rooted in a contract, but in mutual trust and genuine emotion. Still, she knew the road ahead would require courage and patience. One evening, as they stargazed together, Alexander took her hand and said, "I know there are still challenges we must face, but I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." Sophia's heart swelled with hope. For the first time, she truly believed a future together was possible. Life at the Hayes mansion began to feel familiar to Sophia. but her relationship with Alexander continued to evolve. After meeting Ethan, something fundamental shifted. Alexander became more attentive and present, as though he was beginning to grasp the life Sophia had led before entering his world. One morning, as they sipped coffee on the terrace, Alexander made an unexpected proposal. "I want Ethan to live here." Sophia's eyes widened in shock. "Are you serious?" she asked, still processing his words. "I'm serious. If we're going to build something together, I want him to be part of it from the start." Sophia's heart raced. The thought of being close to her son was everything she had ever wanted, yet doubts lingered. "What about the contract?" she asked hesitantly. Alexander took a deep breath before responding. "The contract doesn't have to be a barrier. We can amend the terms to ensure Ethan has a place here without complicating anything." Sophia remained silent, deeply moved by Alexander's willingness to reshape his life for her. It was an act that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Preparations for Ethan's arrival began immediately. Alexander instructed Margaret to ready a room for the boy, carefully designed with Sophia's input. She wanted the space to feel warm and familiar, with touches that reminded Ethan of the home where he had grown up.
On the day Ethan arrived, Sophia was a bundle of nerves. When the mansion doors opened and Ethan rushed into her arms, she held him tightly, as though shielding him from the world. "Mommy, this place is so big!" Ethan exclaimed, his wide eyes filled with wonder as he looked around. Alexander, who had been watching from a distance, approached slowly. Kneeling to Ethan's level, he extended his hand. "Welcome, Ethan. I hope you'll like it here." Ethan shook his hand with a shy smile. "Thank you." Alexander smiled, and Sophia realized that beneath his usual composure, he was genuinely trying to connect with Ethan. The first few days were filled with adjustments and discoveries. Ethan quickly adapted to the luxurious environment of the mansion, exploring every nook and cranny and bombarding everyone with curious questions. Though Alexander was typically reserved, he showed patience and care, answering each of Ethan's inquiries with calm attentiveness. One night, as Sophia tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Mom, is Mr. Alexander a good man?" Sophia was taken aback by the question, but answered honestly, "He is a good man. Every day he's learning to be even better." Ethan smiled, satisfied with her response, and drifted off to sleep. Sophia sat beside him, gazing at his peaceful face. For the first time in years, she felt she was on the right path. Over time, Alexander and Ethan began to form a relationship. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the garden. Alexander, who had once seemed distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one walk, Ethan suddenly stopped and looked up at Alexander. "Do you like my mom?" he asked, his candor catching Alexander off guard. Alexander chuckled at the boy's straightforwardness. "Yes, I like your mom. She's a very special person." Ethan smiled and continued walking, leaving Alexander with a soft grin on his face. The simple yet meaningful exchange was a testament to the strengthening bond between them. One afternoon, Sophia found Alexander in his study, engrossed in a pile of documents. She hesitated at the doorway before stepping in, carrying a cup of tea. "May I bother you?" she asked softly. Alexander looked up and smiled. "Always." She sat on a nearby sofa, quietly watching him work. There was something reassuring about seeing him so focused and dedicated. "You work so hard, for us," Sophia said, breaking the silence. Alexander put down his pen and looked at her directly. "Because you're worth it." The simplicity of his response made Sophia's heart race. Despite the challenges they had faced, she knew they were building something truly meaningful together. Time passed quickly, and the Hayes mansion began to radiate a newfound energy. The relationship between Alexander and Sophia grew deeper, while Ethan became an indispensable part of their home. Their shared moments, both mundane and extraordinary, nurtured a love that blossomed naturally. The anticipation of their unborn child brought them even closer. One evening, while resting on the terrace, Sophia felt a mild discomfort in her abdomen. Assuming it was a common symptom of pregnancy, she tried to ignore it, but the pain intensified, prompting her to call for Margaret. "Sophia's going into labor," Margaret announced, her eyes wide with concern. Alexander rushed to the bedroom, where Sophia was breathing heavily, trying to endure the contractions. "We're going to the hospital now," he said firmly, holding her hand tightly. The drive to the hospital was tense. Alexander, usually composed, couldn't hide his anxiety. He held Sophia's hand, whispering words of encouragement, his gaze never leaving her. "Everything will be fine, Sophia. I'm here with you." At the hospital, the medical team quickly took over, but Alexander refused to leave Sophia's side. He stayed with her through every step, gripping her hand and offering words of support. Hours later, the room was filled with the sound of a newborn's cry. Alexander looked up to see a tiny baby boy cradled in his arms, his heart overflowing with emotion.
"He's perfect, Sophia, absolutely perfect," Alexander said, tears streaming down his face. Sophia smiled, exhausted but filled with happiness. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A few days later, as Sophia rested in her bedroom with their newborn cradled in her arms, Alexander entered, holding an envelope. His expression was serious, yet his eyes radiated warmth. "Sophia, I want you to know something," he said, sitting beside her and opening the envelope. To her astonishment, Alexander tore the contract into pieces, letting the fragments scatter across the floor. "This contract means nothing anymore. Everything I've done so far has been for you and our family. I don't want anything, not even a contract, to define our future." Taking her hand in his, Alexander looked into her eyes, his voice filled with love. "You've brought light into my life. You've taught me what true love means, what it feels like to have a family. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, raising our children and facing everything together." From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box and opened it to reveal an elegant diamond ring, its brilliance catching the light. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks, her heart overflowing with joy. "Yes, Alexander, I will." Ethan, who had been peeking through the door, burst into the room, throwing his arms around them. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed, his face glowing with excitement. Alexander scooped the boy into his arms, and together the three celebrated the moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with joy and anticipation. Sophia envisioned a ceremony that reflected her roots and the love they had nurtured, and Alexander did everything possible to bring her vision to life. The mansion transformed into a fairy tale setting, adorned with rare flowers, subtle lighting, and details that blended American and European traditions seamlessly.
The long-awaited day arrived, with the sun shining brightly over the garden where the ceremony was held. Sophia glowed in a white dress, accented with golden details, while Ethan, dressed in a small suit, proudly carried the rings. As Sophia walked down the aisle, Alexander's gaze was filled with emotion, as though seeing her for the first time. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, taking her hand. Their vows were simple, yet profound, promising love, respect, and partnership. Their kiss drew cheers and applause from the guests. The reception that followed was a harmonious blend of culture and love,
Traditional American music intertwined with melodies from Sophia's homeland, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and lively. Ethan playing with his baby brother and basking in the joy of their new life together. "This is the beginning of everything I've ever dreamed of," Sophia said softly, her eyes scanning the joyful scene around her as she stood beside Alexander. "And it's only the beginning," he replied, squeezing her hand. As the evening drew to a close, under a starlit sky, Alexander and Sophia shared a dance. Surrounded by family and friends, they celebrated a love that had overcome all odds. It was the perfect ending to a journey that had started unexpectedly, but had blossomed into a story of true love. While Ethan laughed and played with the baby, Alexander and Sophia exchanged a look filled with unspoken promises, to face the future together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. They knew they had everything they needed: love, connection, and a family that would only grow stronger. Under the starlit sky, their story found its resolution, the start of a new life brimming with hope, love, and happiness. This tale stands as a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the determination to build a happy family. If you were in Sophia's position, would you be willing to forgive and start over? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire others to find hope and overcome life's challenges. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with friends and loved ones to spread its message of love and hope. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.